Some of us spend our time playing new releases, or whatever games are in the charts. I, on the other hand, prefer the finer things in life. A great game is like a fine wine and gets better with age. But like a fine wine, sometimes these commodities hold significant value. You may not be able to afford thousands of classic games, but I certainly can. So I am here to educate you and share with you my experiences with some of the best games of all time. Let me take you all the way back to Christmas 1994. I am only 8 years old, and by this point I've been obsessed with games for a few years. I had been through an Amstrad CPC 464, an NES, and now I was onto my dream console, the Super Nintendo. I loved this console to bits, and I have the exact same unit here which I got all the way back in 1993, and I constantly have it hooked up to this day. It's a lovely system to own, and it's so much better than all the poor kids in my class who owned Master Systems. The previous year I had been bought the likes of Mario World, Mario All-Stars, Star Wing and Street Fighter 2, so I had already played quite a few games that would go on to become the stuff of legends. Even at the age of 8, I would follow what was going on in the gaming world. I managed to do this as my mother would buy me a monthly copy of Nintendo Official Magazine, and I would regularly watch Games Master on Channel 4. In fact, who remembers Games Master? What a load of rubbish that was. A bunch of nerds, virgins and social rejects bragging about how good they were at games. Even the children on the show were disgusting, snotty little toe rags. The only thing I wanted to watch the show for was to see new games. Forget about all the other parasites and nonsense. Anyway, I am going extremely off topic. So it was across these platforms I spotted one of the greatest looking games I had ever seen. The graphics and music looked and sounded like the game came from the future, and looked far superior to anything I had previously seen. Especially compared to the music and graphics on the poor children at school Sega consoles. Genesis does what Nintendo don't? What even the bloody hell was that? Worse graphic and sound capabilities? Fouled CD add-ons? Less buttons on the controller so more simple people could play? I suppose they had Sonic. Gotta go fast. Not that I have anything against the Mega Drive, mind you. It's a million times better than anything on the market today. I just feel the SNES had a lot stronger edge. Back on the subject of DK, I was already familiar with the Donkey Kong brand, as I owned a copy of Donkey Kong Classics on my NES. This game fascinated me as a child because Donkey Kong was an older game than Super Mario Bros. Yet it still featured Mario as the main playable character, even though he wasn't classified as the star of the game. What I found even more strange and disturbing was in Donkey Kong Jr., Mario actually played the main villain of the game. This blew my tiny mind as a child. What sort of villain has a moustache? When Donkey Kong was finally announced, I was not sure whether to think of Donkey Kong as a goodie or a baddie. Something else I was also slightly puzzled about was who was Diddy Kong. Was this a new name for Donkey Kong Jr.? You see, I was used to absolute balderdash and tomfoolery. For example, Bowser and his offspring had completely different names in the television show to what they had in the game. Stuff like this used to annoy me so much as a child. Thinking about it, it still annoys me a bit now. Is a little bit of continuity so difficult? Anyway, thankfully for me, this time there was no plot holes, as it was later revealed in Donkey Kong Country that Donkey Kong was in fact Donkey Kong Jr. and Diddy Kong was his nephew. It turned out that the original Donkey Kong had now grown old and was now referred to as Cranky Kong. Cranky Kong, aka the original Donkey Kong from the arcade and NES game, is an old rambling character who constantly complains and often breaks the fourth wall. He can also be described as argumentative, old, bad-tempered, and during fourth wall breaking moments often complains about how modern games are too easy and not as good as they were in the good old days. Honestly, what a ridiculous character. Who would grow older then start doing that? Back on the subject of Christmas 1994, I woke up that morning to copious amounts of Power Ranger figures, Power Rangers the game, Aladdin, Earthworm Jim, and of course, Donkey Kong Country. My horrible little Sega-ridden friends used to love coming around my house and playing with my toys and games and getting their Sega-ridden fingers all over my controllers. One would think my current obsession with the Power Rangers would equate me to pumping the most time over that period into the Power Rangers game. However, even as a child, I could tell that the Power Rangers game was not a fine wine. It was nothing more than a cheap alcopop, bright in colour to try and trick young people into investing their time unwisely. I have vivid memories of playing all four of these games that Christmas Day. However, no memory is clearer than inserting Donkey Kong Country into the Super Nintendo for the first time. You could even say now, Christmas was in full swing. Donkey Kong Country was developed by Rareware, an extremely promising British developer who would later go on to create the likes of Banjo-Kazooie, Diddy Kong Racing and GoldenEye. It was this game that initially lit the cannon that shot Rareware into fame. The game is set on Donkey Kong Island and centres around Donkey Kong and his nephew Diddy Kong, who must recover their stolen hoard of bananas from the evil King K. Rool and the Kremlins. Bizarrely, the story of this game actually draws a lot of comparisons on a historical level to the Banana Wars that started in the 19th century. Basically, the evil United States military, along with the United Fruit Company, intervened and occupied certain regions in Central America and the Caribbean. This was in order to try and gain a monopoly on the production and trade of sugar canes, tobacco, and of course, bananas. Those naughty Yanks! They're always up to something. Stealing bananas, slavery, oil wars, whatever will they think of next? They're always up to such mischief in the British colonies. Back on a slightly more light-hearted subject, Donkey Kong Country sold more than 9 million copies. It was a commercial success and the second best-selling SNES game of all time. Its success spawned two sequels on the SNES, Donkey Kong Country 2, Diddy Kong's Quest, and Donkey Kong Country 3, Dixie Kong's Double Trouble. In the next generation, Donkey Kong 64 came out, which was essentially another collect-em-up style Mario 64 clone. And lately, in more modern times, DK has returned to form in two new 2D side-scrollers, Donkey Kong Country Returns on the Wii in 2010, and Donkey Kong Country Tropic Freeze in 2014. Every single one of these games is of the highest calibre and all stand apart from the next. Now you all know about the history of the series, both past and present, I'm going to stop monkeying around and tell you a little bit about the gameplay. Donkey Kong Country is a platform game where players must complete 40 different side-scrolling levels and get the bananas back from the Kremlins. Levels are themed in various manners and consist of varying tasks such as swimming, riding in mine carts, launching out of barrel cannons, or swinging from vine to vine. The player begins with a minimum of 6 lives. Players lose a life if they get hit by an enemy or fall off the screen. However, the player can gain additional lives by collecting items scattered throughout the levels, including bananas, golden letters that spell out Kong, extra life balloons, and golden animal tokens that lead to bonus levels. Like all the majority of side-scrollers, there is a nice variety of enemies. To defeat an enemy, players can either execute a roll, jump or a hand slap. However, some enemies cannot be so easily taken down, so sometimes the player must throw a barrel or use the assistance of an animal buddy. There are also many secret passages that can lead to bonus games where the player can earn additional lives or other items, as well as gain possible shortcuts throughout the level. Finding each of these secrets adds to your completion percentage that can be seen on the menu screen. Players can switch between Donkey and Diddy Kong using the select button. Donkey is the larger of the two and can defeat enemies more easily, while Diddy is faster and more agile. I mentioned earlier about animal buddies. These can be found by breaking various wooden crates, and the helpers include Ramby the Rhino, Expresso the Ostrich, On Guard the Swordfish, Winky the Frog, and Squawks the Parrot. Just like a large number of platform games post Super Mario Bros. 3, Donkey Kong Country has all its levels spread across a world map, so it is easy to track your progress and you can go back and play levels once again if you have already completed them. After slugging through all the levels in the game, the grand finale is a big fight with King K. Rool in an effort to regain your bananas from the leader of the United Fruit Company. According to the people of the internet, this game has a reputation for being fairly difficult to beat. Personally, I think this couldn't be any further from the truth. If I was an 8-year-old boy and had no difficulty completing this game, then all the adults of today must be a bunch of uncoordinated Neanderthals. Cranky Kong is 100% right. This is a fairly easy game, and it's a far cry from the difficulty of those of the 1980s. In fact, today you get bloody achievements for simply turning games consoles on. You've all gone soft and weak, I tell you. On a graphical front, this game is easily one of the best looking games of the 16-bit generation. The graphics were revolutionary at the time and look great to this day. The whole game, from the playable characters and enemies to the varied scenery, all has a fantastic 3D look to it. Back in 1994, this was probably the best looking game I had ever played, and the art style is well polished enough to make it look good forever. Just like the graphics in Donkey Kong, the music really is something special. From its upbeat jungle theme, to the factory theme, to the extremely relaxing underwater theme aquatic ambience, the soundtrack has become something of legends, and many of these tracks live on to this day in the newest editions of Donkey Kong Country and on the Donkey Kong Country levels of Super Smash Bros. The tracks fit the levels perfectly and help you get fully immersed in the game even further. My final thoughts is not only is this one of the greatest Nintendo games of all time, it's one of the greatest games full stop. It's right up there with Super Mario World, The Legend of Zelda and Final Fantasy VII, and it has the perfect combination of great graphics, great music and great gameplay, both then and now, even though it was released in 1994. Anyone with any finesse would have played and grown to appreciate this game. If you haven't, what the bloody hell have you been doing with your life? Are you joking? You like Call of Duty? You bloody moron! You uncultured idiot! This is exactly why you need to watch my channel, so you can learn to appreciate good games. Again, as this game sold 9 million copies, there's 9 million bloody copies floating around the world. However, due to its popularity, many want to hold on to this game, so it still holds some value. However, it's still a lot cheaper than any modern polished turd. If you are poor, you can simply pick it up for a couple of quid on the Wii or Wii U Virtual Console. Thank you for watching today's episode. So right now, I'm going to leave you with the soothing sounds of aquatic ambience covered by my friend Ryan Harris. Please like my channel, subscribe and leave comments in the section below. Oh, and follow me on Twitter. Cheerio!